In 1660, Charles Stuart returned in triumph to England and was crowned king in Westminster Abbey. Oliver Cromwell's body, with those of Ireton and Bradshaw, were exhumed and hanged from a gibbet at Tyburn. His head was stuck on a pike at Westminster, where it stayed for 25 years. 10 regicides were publicly executed. Over the next 2 years, a series of acts restored the crown and wiped away almost all the laws passed since the summer of 1641. England was turning its back on Cromwell, the English Revolution, and the Civil War. So far, we have looked at the failures of Charles I and the reasons for the road to war, and then the failures of the interregnum and its inability to meet Cromwell's aims of a godly reformation and rule by Parliament. In this lecture, we need to consider how far the restoration of the king was a success. Firstly, knowledge-wise, you will be able to explain the character of Charles II. Secondly, skills-wise, you will analyse the elements of continuity and change between 1640 and 1667. Thirdly, behaviourally, you need to make judgments on the events leading up to the restoration of the king. Under the humble petition and advice when Oliver Cromwell died in 1658, the protectorate passed to his son Richard. Richard was in no way prepared or able to control the elements of protectorate Britain. When Richard Cromwell's third protectorate parliament began collapsing, General Monk, based in Scotland, saw the only way to stability was via the restoration of the monarchy. Contacting Charles Stuart, Monk persuaded him to move into Protestant Netherlands out of Catholic France. Once Monk had defeated the elements of the army against him, he ensured that Rump was restored, recalling its pre-purge members to enable the Long Parliament to dissolve itself. It was the Convention Parliament of 1660, called a Convention Parliament because it called itself and was not summoned by the King, which agreed to Charles II's terms of restoration. Charles had issued the Declaration of Breda to preempt Parliament and smooth the way for the restoration. The declaration included 4 key promises from Charles to Parliament: cooperation and harmony with the political nation, an amnesty for actions in the years of war and interregnum, except for those who had signed the death warrant of Charles I, the settlement of outstanding issues in partnership with Parliament, and arrears of pay would be given to the army, and religious toleration would continue if the monarchy was restored. This was a clear indication to Parliament that Charles II was to be nothing like his father and was willing to work with Parliament to ensure a settled kingdom. On the 25th of May 1660, Charles II rode into London to cheers and celebration. The end of Cromwell's austere Puritan Republic was over. However, the promise of a broad tolerated church diminished when Venier, a fifth monarchist, led an uprising in London in 1661. Though the uprising was a failure, it was a pro-royalist backlash in the elections of 1661, causing the election of what has become known as the Cavalier Parliament. This parliament was pro-royalist and saw radical religious sects as a threat to the stability of the newly restored monarchy. More impacts came in the form of a new Uniformity Act in 1662, which reinstalled the Anglican Church as the national church. Failure to worship as an Anglican saw the return of an attempt to punish by law. What actually happened, however, rather than forcing the nonconformists into the Anglican Church, a huge dissenter influence developed in English society. The state, without the prerogative court of the High Commission, could not force people to worship a certain way. Financially, however, with the removal of the Star Chamber and the ability to use feudal methods of raising funds, Charles II, unlike his father, was tied to Parliament for money. Like his father, Charles I, Charles II saw criticism as disaffection with him and took it personally. Like his grandfather, James I, Charles enjoyed a hedonistic lifestyle, described as frivolous, promiscuous and chaotically informal. This must in some way have been due to his living the life of an exiled monarch for 11 years, with very little money, and then having the throne of 3 kingdoms given to him with all the benefits that entails. With the merry monarch installed on the throne, his courtiers and much of England began to enjoy the lifestyle. Again, after 11 years of Puritan rule, the austere gowns were well and truly cast off. Charles II, friend John Wilmot, Earl of Rochester, wrote in his Satyr on Charles II, "Restless he rolls from whore to whore, a merry monarch, scandalous and poor." Though married, Charles II will have no legitimate heirs to the throne. However, via his lifestyle, he ran between 10 to 15 illegitimate children, whose descendants have included Princess Diana, Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, and Samantha Cameron. One of the major issues for Charles II, like his father and grandfather, was his connection to high-profile Catholics at court. His mother, Henrietta Maria, was ever present. His wife, Catherine of Braganza from Portugal, famous for her love of tea. His brother James, Duke of York, who converts to Catholicism in 1669, will be of major concern, especially as Charles II has no legitimate heir to the throne. And George Digby, Earl of Bristol, who supported the King in court and in the House of Lords. In this lecture, we explored some of the elements of Restoration settlement, and you need to consider how far the restoration of the King was a success. Firstly, knowledge-wise, we explored the character of Charles II and how he in some ways undermined the idea of divine right. Secondly, skills-wise, you explored some elements of continuity and change between 1640 and 1667, and you need to complete the associated material to expand. Thirdly, behaviourally, you need to make judgments on the events leading up to the restoration of the King and how far the restoration was an unavoidable event. Now complete the associated material.